That's a very interesting question because, in fact, that's one of the characteristics of the electric and magnetic fields from transmission lines and from underground lines in particular, is that the fields drop off dramatically with distance. And so, therefore, if you want to know where the location of the highest field is, then that would be essentially directly over any kind of underground transmission lines. Or if you're on let's say, a utility right of way where there are overhead lines, then the highest fields are directly under those lines. Well, and so again, there are guidelines that say that those pacemakers, can be affected by very high fields, but not of the kinds of the size fields that we're talking about here. You have to remember that these are not fields that radiate. These are fields that are so low in frequency, 60 cycles per second, that they're far different from what you might think of as your cell phone emitting or a television or radio antenna emitting. Um, a lot of the research that started back in the early 80s and so forth was in fact stimulated by the idea that somebody had that, perhaps they could, perhaps these fields could be linked to some increase in cancer. However, those early studies then triggered a lot of subsequent research, and that's why I'm encouraging people to look, not at the internet generally, but really look at kind of legitimate public health sites, such as the World Health Organization or ICNIRP or Public Health England and so forth, because those have been reviewed time and time again by authorities and scientists who know how those studies are carried out. And that's how the present standard was derived. And I think that it's a standard that is protective. And I think that, I feel confident that the kind of concern that people are expressing is not going to be warranted. And I think part of the reason that I mentioned earlier was that we've been using this type of electric power for, many, many decades. And the public health statistics that have followed the United States population and populations around the world have not shown any correlation with an increasing risk of a disease that correlates with our increasing use of electricity. And I would just reference people to things like the World Health Organization analysis. I mean, they have essentially looked at that literature not only for cancer, but for other kinds of potential health effects that people may be concerned about, such as nervous system effects and so on. And again, they've not found anything consistent that would suggest that it's a risk factor for increasing nervous system diseases. But when you're down at these very low frequencies, that's one of the issues that all of these scientific organizations have looked at, is to see whether or not there is a mechanism by which these kinds of electric and magnetic fields can cause damage in biological tissues. And the answer is they haven't found anything. A lot of scientists have tried very hard to do it. And remember that we all live in a electromagnetic environment. There are electric fields from the clouds overhead that pass us by, and then there's of course the magnetic field of the earth that always points to the north, and those are steady, but we move around in them, so they are actually kind of time varying electric and magnetic fields that affect us, but they're again very low frequency. And so I think that's one of the key ingredients here that are important.